the people on the supremacists on the bus, they'd seen the sort of the heights of where their whiteness would take them, you know.
Right.
There's a you know, and Obama, of course, the fact that Obama was president for two terms probably contributed to this as well. There's a kind of dignity tax that some of these people are willing to pay, where they will be penalized financially themselves because, you know, the whole idea of the Trump administration is just basically taking money from them and giving it to the 0.01%. Where I live, upstate New York, I live half the year in upstate. There's a truck that's on cinder blocks. The guy can't afford tires anymore, right? And clearly he's on many forms of assistance. But the license plate says taxes too high. And that kind of summarizes it for me, you know.
Yeah.
To the harbor race excursion with the voice to have.
Books really saved my life.
By the way, it's great to be back in Toronto. I miss this town. I saw the Glenn Gould thing today. I went to Schmaltz's. I had the Chub Chub. It's a good town, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah. Chub Chub. This is the novel Lake Success. It's a very bright book, as you can see. Yeah, the focus groups liked it a lot because you could see it from across an airport. And they didn't like the text. They were like, oh, what the hell is this?
Great cover, though.
Great cover, though.
Yeah.
I'm known for my great covers.
Well, if you want a great-looking cover for your shelf, it's back there, by the way.
Yeah. It's 78 Canadian dollars. It's worth it, though, because you can see it from afar. So the hero of Lake Success, Barry Cohen, is a hedge fund manager. Yay, great. To be more precise, he's running a hedge fund into the ground while being investigated by the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is our version of, I don't know if you have this, but we have a lot of financial crime in the States. As the novel starts, Barry decides to run away from his failing marriage, his failing fund, and his autistic son on a Greyhound bus to pursue his college girlfriend in El Paso, Texas. Now, what would drive anyone away from their family when they need him so much? Yes, Barry is what in Yiddish is called a schmuck. He's also a small-time ganef, or crook. And as he depletes his funds on his journey across the country, he becomes a schnorrer, or beggar. See, never say you don't learn anything at a Gary Shteyngart reading. Yeah, I've just taught you all the Yiddish you'll ever need to know, especially if you're interested in finance. Now, people have asked me, you know, why did you write a book about a hedge fund guy? Why not your usual Russian losers, you know? Why not write about yourself some more? Seems to be profitable. Well, in the past decade, I became aware of the fact that a large number of the friends that I'd come of age with in Manhattan were gone, displaced by rising costs to Berlin, Abu Dhabi, LA, the Mid-Hudson Valley. My friends, many of whom were fellow alumni of Stuyvesant High School in Manhattan, and yeah, I knew there's always one. There's always one guy. Look at him, he's like number one. Yeah.
Putting up their hand like, hi, I'm here.
Yeah. Fellow alumni of Stuyvesant High School and Oberlin College. Complete silence. And most of them worked as writers and graphic designers, academics and journalists, the heart of what used to be the creative middle class. But they were all gone. And as I walked down the now unfamiliar streets of my city, eyeing a new breed of closely shaved, athletic individual, I kept wondering, who are these people? Upon closer inspection, I discovered they mostly worked for banks, or hedge funds, or private equity firms. Now, I'd only met a handful of bankers in my life, but around 2012, I decided my next novel would be about finance, since there was nobody else to write about in Manhattan. And I realized pretty early on in my research that people in finance often had a different view of reality than most of the people I'd previously known. An older currency trader at a massive bank, I'm not going to mention UBS by name, but it wasn't UBS, it was Credit Suisse, no. He complained to me of the struggles of the middle class. And I said, yeah, I hear you, we're struggling. And he said, yeah, I'm struggling too, I'm in the middle class. And I said, how do you define the middle class? And he said, just people earning between $2 and $4 million a year.
Wow.
So that's the New York middle class.
Good.
So when it was time to cobble together a character like Barry Cohen, who makes a lot more than $4 million a year, I kept thinking back to all the wonderful deluded people I'd met along the way. So I'm going to read you just a few pages from Lake Success, just to give you a little hint, a little taste of Barry Cohen. This scene is set in Atlanta. It's about midway through the book. So by the way, I did the Greyhound journey too. I spent 4 months on the Hound, or the dog as we call it. Yeah, you're
Who's
welcome.
the we?
You're
Who's
welcome.
the we
We,
there?
me, the royal.
Yes.
The royal me. Yeah, so that was interesting. So Barry gets off in the middle of this journey in Hotlanta to visit his protege, Jeff Park, whom he actually fired from his fund at one point. And he's almost run out of money. He's left New York with nothing but a rollerboard full of watches, because he collects watches, weirdo. And he also had to get rid of his credit cards for complicated reasons. So he's in Atlanta to beg Jeff Park for a little bit of a bridge loan to get him to El Paso. That's him being a schnorrer, by the way, begging for money. Okay. Jeff Park's living room was as palatial as the entrance to a modest New York museum. Enormous golden lights hung from the ceiling, which was at least 20 feet in height. Jeff had a full head of hair, gums that didn't recede, and he did push-ups in the middle of the day. He had gone to Cornell, but had not played lacrosse like most of the guys in Barry's shop. So what's up, Barry? Jeff said, just passing through Atlanta, decided to look me up. They were sitting in Jeff's kitchen. Jeff had brought out a bottle of Yamazaki 20-year scotch and was serving it straight up, quite decadent for 1:27 p.m. What the hell did Jeff Park do for a living? He had cashed out of Barry's hedge fund with zero. All of this is going to sound crazy, Barry said. I'm listening. I'm on a journey by bus. Barry knew that he would eventually have to explain his flight from New York to people in his tax brackets. He knew that news of his meltdown would immediately form the latest bulletin in the incestuous, bloodthirsty world from which he had sprung, but he doubted it would really surprise anyone. The people in his world could be nuts. One fund was essentially a cult with its own Bible, ritual mind control, and feats of strength. One fellow at another fund, a quant billionaire, played piano at a third-rate dive bar while passing around a tip jar. Like your first ankle monitor bracelet or your fourth divorce, the occasional break with reality was an important part of any hedge fund titan's biography. The things I've seen, Barry said, and he told Jeff a few of his Greyhound adventures so far. Jeff Park seemed interested. He poured more drinks, although he insisted Barry chase his with water. Sounds a little bit like you're doing a middle-aged version of On the Road, he said. Like that one-eyed Mexican dude in New Jersey you said fell asleep on your shoulder? That sounds pretty Kerouac. That's exactly right, Barry shouted. Oh, no wonder he had picked Jeff Park to host him. The man had literary sensibilities way beyond his colleagues. They really did a good job of educating up at Cornell. I used to take the Greyhound to visit my uncle's family in Savannah, Jeff said. Everyone there looked at us like we were freaks. Everyone looks at me like I'm a freak. You kind of are a freak, Barry. Barry took that as the highest of compliments. He was bonding with this former employee whom he had fired. They were going to be friends now. So are you from around here originally, he asked. Yeah, Jeff said. I moved back down to take care of my parents. Your parents are, I want to say, from China. Close enough, Jeff Park said. My wife is Indian, Barry said. Rock, Jeff said. You ought to get married, Barry said, completely forgetting that his own marriage was but a team of 7 lawyers short of kaputs. His instinct to help Jeff Park was overwhelming. He remembered his wife's friend, that Asian woman from Brooklyn, Tina or Lena or something. I threw away my cell phone, Barry said. Can I check something on your computer? A laptop was provided. It had been a week since he had touched a keyboard. He brought up his wife's profile. What a gorgeous family you have, Jeff Park said, pointing at a profile photo of his wife and son. When I worked for you, I think you were just about to get married. God, that kid of yours, those beautiful eyes. Yeah, Barry said, his hand frozen over the keyboard. Yeah, that's nice. But here's what I really wanted to show you. He scrolled through the list of Seema's friends until he found the right one. Now, this girl is spunky, Barry said. She called me a tool to my face. And I think she's pretty intellectual like you. Oh, one night in Brooklyn, she made these great Chinese dumplings for us. I bet your folks would love her. Mina Kim, Jeff Park read off the screen. Ah, not really up my alley. Barry was heartbroken. But she's Chinese, he said. Jeff Park stared at him. I'm more into the Southern Belle type, he finally said. Ah, Barry sighed. But thanks for looking out for me. You're like that woman from Fiddler on the Roof. Barry sort of knew what he was talking about, matchmaker. Jeff Park had a wide cultural reach. Well, I'm going to make it my mission to get you married, he said. Nice guy like you. I'm not averse to the ladies, Jeff Park said. I've designed this place with them in mind. Huh, how so? Jeff Park took him on a tour, starting with a massive glass-top dining table. You see these lights, he said, pointing out a trio of Sputnik-style globes hanging over the mirrored surface. The average girl I date is 5'6", or an inch taller than the national average. I have a spreadsheet that lists the attributes of each girl I've ever dated. It's super granular. So if I'm making her dinner, and she's standing here, 5'6", waiting for me, talking to me, maybe having a drink, the light from these lamps is directly level with her eyes. She can see better, and I can enjoy her glow.
Oh, God.
Barry was impressed by Jeff Park's thoughtfulness. A spreadsheet. The rap on guys in finance was all wrong. They cared too much. He knew he did. If you looked at it a certain way, he had abandoned his family in New York because he didn't have the emotional bandwidth to accommodate their special needs. He examined an enormous couch. Okay, this sofa is the perfect height for a 5'6" woman, Jeff said. When she sits down, the sofa waterfalls at the back of her knees. He invited Barry to sit down. You see, there's a gap of at least 3 inches between the back of your knee and the couch because you're tall. But if you were a 5'6" woman, you'd be completely snug. So you only date women of that height? Barry asked. Well, there's some variance, Jeff Park said. Maybe half a sigma. I don't want the tail wagging the dog, but yeah, mostly. You're a romantic, Barry said. Jeff Park shrugged and blushed. He was not unhandsome. His face was chiseled and tanned to perfection. The black athletic gear he was wearing made him look like a glossy seal in human form. Only the Rolex Skydweller on his wrist did not appeal to Barry's taste. Thank you.
Right? Wonderful reading and wonderful novel. And I kind of have to say right off the top, I feel taken for a ride in this novel because you begin by introducing this wonderful, sympathetic character that I begin to care about, and then slowly and then all at once, his myopic nature, his general horrors come to view, and I'm like, well, I'm already invested. I already care about this guy. So how in 2018 do you have the guts, the bravery to make a rich white man sympathetic?
I know.
How dare you?
How dare you? And people have said this to me. They're like, why? Why did you make me read this? You know, Now I don't hate all people in finance. But it's okay to do so, folks. I give you the permission.
Yeah, I still felt like it.
Good, thank you. Well, you know, I mean, I've written, as I've said, 4 books about post-Soviet Jews like myself, the saps, as I call them, Soviet Ashkenazi pessimists, where the glass is not only half full, not half full, there's no glass, you know. But those nebbishes, if you will, are sympathetic, you know, because they're all underdogs. All my previous characters, including my memoir, starting myself, were really about underdogs. And I decided, you know, I've written 4 books. I decided I'm going to set a challenge for myself, and I'm going to take somebody from an industry that, I mean, I don't know how you feel about it here, but in New York and Manhattan has been, well, not even in Manhattan, but I mean, I feel personally angry at it because it displaced all the people I know and love. Sure. It displaced the teachers and social workers that used to live in my neighborhood. Everyone's gone, you know, and it's just these people. And in getting to know them, and I spent 3 or 4 years researching them, what I discovered was, in 4 years in hedge world, and what made me more sympathetic in a sense was just how unhappy everybody was. Right. You know, and the general level of unhappiness on their part and the part of their families, their spouses, their children. Their children are too young to know they're unhappy, but they are. You know.
You see the sadness in their eyes.
The sadness in their eyes and in their Instagram. Yeah, it's a sad thing. But But it was this, because they created a world. So, in America, poor people are shunted to the sides involuntarily. But rich people want to be apart from society. They voluntarily moat themselves and cut themselves off from the world. So most of the people I knew lived in their Upper East Side apartment. Then they ping-ponged to their Midtown fund, their Midtown club, their Hampton estates, often by aid of helicopter. And they had no idea that they were living in Manhattan, basically, in this incredible, interesting, multicultural city with great food outside of their clubs and all this stuff. And the level of sort of separation from the world was so pronounced. My kid is 4, and he was applying. In New York, you have to apply to all these very fancy schools to get in. And one of the hedge fund wives said to me, "Oh, you should apply to ethical culture, this one school." She said, because it's very diverse.
That's in the book, isn't it?
That's in the book, yeah. Everything's in the book. I have no imagination. Everything's journalism, basically. But she said, you have to apply to ethical culture. It's very diverse. I was like, I don't think it's that diverse. And she said, oh, yes. Some of these kids, their dads aren't even hedge fund guys. They're just doctors or lawyers.
Well, so what happens to a city? What happens to a city when what you call the creative middle class? What happens when those people leave?
Yeah. Well, they are in far ends of Bushwick and some in Hoboken, New Jersey. So they exist.
Right.
I can't afford to live in Brooklyn. I live in Manhattan.
Right.
But what does happen? I don't know. It's an interesting question. Because if you're interested in culture, there's plenty of culture there. You can go to the plethora of museums. You can go to all these sanitized places like the High Line. I mean, it's all there. Theoretically, it's a world city on a par with London, and everything's great. But the city that I grew up in is completely gone. And that was a very strange and wonderful city. It was a city of stories. One of my favorite books growing up was Jay McInerney's Bright Lights, Big City. And one of the first scenes in that book, if you remember, is the main character comes out of a subway, and this guy comes up to him, and he's got something in his jacket that's squirming, and he says, "Psst, you want to buy a ferret?" And that was New York.
Right.
The ferret business was booming, the illegal ferret business. Everyone was selling you something. I mean, everything was a story, And when I was writing my memoir and looking back to the 70s and 80s, it was easy to write. Now, what am I writing about? I'm writing about these doofuses. But again, I'm a patriot of my city, and I want to describe it as it is, even though what it is not the city I would want it to be.
So you have this book coming out at the moment where we're 10 years from the financial crisis. But you have this all this sameness is happening in Manhattan. So it's a bunch of people who all seem to think of the financial crisis in the same way, which is like, oh, this blip in the radar, this thing that happened that the rest of the people haven't really moved on from.
Yeah, I was interviewing this woman who wasn't in a hedge fund, but she worked for a bank. And she said, yeah, I hated, and she was very young too. This is, Generation Z or something. She was super young. And that's
a thing, by the way.
That's a thing, yeah, I know. I am actually not trying to be funny. She was actually Generation Z. And she said, yeah, and the thing that people in finance always say when they want to talk about how they're being aggrieved is, I work so hard. And she said, during Occupy Wall Street, I had to step over all these people who were camped out on the doorstep of my bank. And they were just smoking reefer all day long. And they didn't realize how hard I worked. And I wanted to tell them, I work really hard. So there's this disconnect, I think, between this idea that the hard work leads, but often it's not even hard work. I mean, if you go on YouTube and put in Shteyngart and Ben Stiller and video, there's a very interesting trailer that Ben Stiller and I made in which we pretend to run a hedge fund called Make Success Capital. It's pretty good. But the joke of that is that we keep blowing up, we keep losing $500 million here and $500 million there, but because we're two white men who went to Dartmouth and played lacrosse, people keep giving us money. There's almost no way to screw up. And a lot of the people I was following over the 3 or 4 years lost hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of dollars for their investors. It didn't matter.
Right.
People would say, oh, well, now Jimmy's really learned his lesson, so here's another billion, right? And the way hedge funds work with 2% is a 2 and 20% system. 2%, you get to keep 2% of whatever people give you, whatever your assets under management are.
Right.
So there was almost no way to lose.
That is remarkable and terrifying to me. But let's talk about Barry a little bit.
Sure.
Barry's a strange guy, and I began to like him a lot, especially as he began to explain what he calls friend moves. Can you tell the audience what friend moves are?
Yeah, so Barry reminds me, when I was growing up in Queens, New York, I came as an immigrant. I was 7 years old. I didn't speak English. I didn't lose my accent until I was 14. I was wearing a giant coat made out of Soviet gerbils and stuff. So
That smelled great.
I think it smelled like the Soviet Union, which was nostalgic and red and borschte, I guess.
Good.
But the kids, for some reason, didn't take to it, or me. It was a yeshiva, a Hebrew school, and I remember telling people hated Russians so much that I remember telling them I wasn't born in Leningrad, I was born in East Berlin, and you know things are bad when you're trying to convince, Jewish kids that you're a German.
Yeah.
But so I would practice these friend moves, because I couldn't speak English, I didn't understand anything, and so I'd stand in front of a mirror and be like, hey, I went to the mall yesterday, what's up? Yeah. Huey Lewis and the News is good band, yes. I like News, I like Huey, I like Lewis.
Together. Yeah.
All three is good.
Yeah.
And these were my friend moves. And then, and then I started
Did they
practicing.
work?
No.
Okay.
But I started practicing, like, what if it was like a computer program, like, and somebody says, oh, which mall did you go to? I'd have to make up a mall because we were too poor to go to a mall. So I'd be like, Kings County Mall? So Barry does something very similar. Again, me not using my imagination, but parceling out pieces of myself. He has these friend moves where he keeps thinking like a computer program. Someone says this, I got to say that. And so many of the people I met in the hedge fund world would say about each other, oh, he has Asperger's, or she, That was sort of a thing. And while I'm not one to make diagnosis, I could sort of see where they could probably figure that out. And so Barry is possibly on the spectrum as well, and his son, of course, is nonverbal and autistic. So in creating a character like Barry, I wanted him to want to fight for something. And his fight throughout his life is to make friends. And he kind of goes overboard, and he becomes like the friendliest guy on Wall Street. And Wall Street is the kind of place where there's usually two kinds of people. One are the quants, these are the math and physics geniuses who are designing the algorithms that now run a lot of these funds. And the other part are the sort of rainmakers who are like, hey, buddy, who can run for Supreme Court choice. Sorry, but
I think that was too soon.
Too soon?
Right? Like, I think
No,
that's happening right now.
yeah, well, live by the bro, die by the bro. But those were the two, and Barry inadvertently finds himself so good at making friends in this very stupid Wall Street way that his part of the fund exists simply because he knows how to slap backs.
Right. But that plays out in a fascinating way when he goes to Baltimore.
Yeah.
And he has to buy crack from someone.
Yeah, he has to buy crack. And by the way, so like I said, I tried to do almost everything in this book.
Wait a minute. Are you
Yeah.
confessing to a crime? There's a camera right here.
That's fine. We're in Canada. This is a safe space. Come October 17th, hey, BYOC, bring your own crack.
That's not the law.
It's not. Come on, give me some crack. But yeah, I kept going around the whole Greyhound tour. I was like, crack? Anyone crack? And it was like, well, we got meth. But I wanted to go retro, and I just like the way crack rocks look. And,
Yeah.
Anyway. So in Baltimore, he tries to buy crack, and that entails a lot of friend moves. And but he's also, like I said, a watch collector, and so he bonds with this young drug dealer, not a crack dealer. Oh yeah, a crack dealer, right? He's
Yes.
a crack dealer, the last crack dealer in Baltimore, because everyone's
Yes.
doing half and half coke and heroin. But he meets this one retro crack dealer,
Right.
and they bond over their love of watches.
No, well, let's talk about the watch collection.
Oh, God.
Because
Yeah.
we got to do it.
You got to do it.
As I was reading this book, I kept on looking up every single watch that was mentioned, and it started at $5,000 watches, and it ended up at something like $200,000 watches, which is nuts. But that is the universe that Barry exists in.
Yeah.
It is also the universe that someone else in the
Oh
room
God!
exists in.
Shut up.
But
So
you mentioned
Yeah,
one of
yeah.
the watches in the book that you actually own yourself, that you wrote in the New Yorker.
It's sad, yeah. So in 2000, I wrote this piece for the New Yorker. It's called "Confessions of a Watch Idiot Savant" or something like that. That's what they're called, WISs, W-I-S. It's an actual term that people who collect watches call themselves. So the WISs, we have secret societies. There's one in Toronto called Red Bar, where you meet secretly and you exchange watches. So you go in and
I have no idea if you're lying right now.
it's absolutely true.
Okay.
So this started in 2016 when I realized Trump might have a chance of winning, and I became very scared. And instead of looking at 538 and all those websites, I decided to get a hobby. I've never had a hobby in my life. And so instead of like baseball statistics, which would have been very inexpensive, I for some reason, well, I remember why I like watches, because when I was growing up, I had a Casio watch that played, a digital watch that played the Russian song Kalinka Malinka, Gooseberries, Gooseberries. And because I couldn't speak English when I was like 7, that was my best friend, was this watch. It's incredible. Yeah, it's a very sad story. So,
Why are you guys laughing?
Yeah, I know. Come on.
Yeah.
Cry with me.
right.
And so I started collecting watches, which was, that got out of hand. And so Barry, when I was looking for a hobby for Barry, and Barry also tries to connect with his son, who is on the spectrum, and he can't quite do it, and watches is one way in which he tries to bridge the gap.
Right. Did you feel self-conscious at all putting that in the book?
The autism?
No, the watches.
Oh, yes. I felt very self-conscious. I thought, okay, already he's starting out with, we're starting out with a person who does a horrible job for a living. He's a schmuck in many ways. He's fled his family, and on top of that, he collects luxury watches.
Right.
So I really wanted to set this, set everything against him, and if I can have one reader left at the end of it, then success.
The reason I stayed with it was because I'm a relatively new father.
Oh.
18 months ago, I became a dad.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Bravo.
I didn't do any of the work.
No, good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the first thought that popped into mind when my daughter was born was, this is it. I can't die. That's no longer an option that's on the table. I could do anything else, but I can't die.
Yeah.
Like I don't jaywalk anymore. That's not on the table because it's like too high of a risk.
Yeah.
But some people don't necessarily take, I think, to parenthood in the same way. And Barry seems to be, in a way, the book is about this guy's journey to confront the idea of like, this is who I am as a father.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was inspired by the fact that I have a kid, my first, one and done. My first kid, who's going to be 5 very soon, and that, and when he was born, I felt the same way. Before that, I was a subscriber to the Arsenic of the Month Club. That seemed fine to me. I was
Roll
like,
the dice. Why not?
Yeah, and Russian men live till 49 anyway, so it's like,
Great.
I'm almost there. But once I had a kid, everything changed, and my feelings about. And when I had the kid, our political situation in America changed, and I was very worried about that, because I grew up in a dictatorship, and well, here we are. I don't mean here, no. Trudeau is adorable. But it does, the book, and I'm glad you saw it this way, the book is kind of, fatherhood is the sort of stealth theme of the book, as is motherhood, because the book goes between Barry, who's running away on the Greyhound bus, and his wife, Seema, who is taking care of their son, Shiva. And Shiva, who starts out, he's nonverbal, he's autistic, but I won't reveal what happens to him, but he does go on a journey of his own.
Now, my big question to you was about how removed Barry is from the reality of America. That there's a scene at the start when he gets on the Greyhound and he thinks that America is going to greet him. I think you said with iced tea.
Pictures of iced tea,
yes,
and
that's right.
corned beef hash, and hush puppies.
And to a certain extent, he's so removed from what America is that everything is like this new and exciting thing. Yeah. To what extent is that just America? A bunch of insular communities living, never really interacting with one another.
Well, the idea that Barry has, and the idea that many people have, especially since this election, is that there's a real America out there, right? There's the real America. And that real America has nothing to do with New York or San Francisco or Los Angeles, although if you add up all our metros, that's 70% of the population. But we're not the real America. But that there's an America somewhere between the Appalachians and the mesas of Arizona that's more real than anything there. And so Barry starts out on this romantic journey where he thinks it's going to be, he's doing the middle-aged Kerouac. He's on the road. He's going to discover all these things. But the people he meets, they have no use for him. And he keeps coming up. And one thing I noticed about people who run hedge funds is, of course, they want some greater meaning. They can't just look at their Bloomberg monitors with blips on the screen. So they think, okay, I did a great bet once and I made $1 billion, even though I then subsequently lost $5 billion. But I made money at one point, so I'm a genius.
Right.
So now I'm going to try to I'm going to try to work on education policy. I'm going to start charter schools. So Barry has all these ideas as well. So he wants to start what he calls the Urban Watch Fund, which will buy poor children in urban areas their first Rolex so they can learn to take care of it. Then he has billionaire baseball trading cards. So instead of baseball players, they're billionaires with all their stats in the back.
Oprah would be there too.
Yeah, Oprah would be, he talks about, he says it's going to be a multicultural thing, it'll be Oprah, and so, he has all these ideas, and it's not that he doesn't mean well, it's just that he has no clue. Right. And to me, that's comedy. Comedy is, I think I'm X, but I'm actually Y, right? All of us think we're one thing, and then the truth is something different, and us not knowing the truth, that to me is what comedy is about. And tragedy as well.
For sure. It is so tragic. There's a lot of what we call in the journalism universe fly-in journalism, right? It's the idea that you get a journalist on a plane and they go to, I don't know, West Virginia, and they go, they stay there for 3 days, and then all of a sudden they understand all of the problems. And then they write the story that's like, well, the coal mines closed, and then the drugs came in, and then all of a sudden that's your whole idea what West Virginia is. Is all of the media that Barry consumes, to blame for him, for his sort of insularness?
Well, yes, but Barry's insularness was paralleled in many ways by my own. I'm not a billionaire, but because I do live on this aircraft carrier parked off of, New Jersey called Manhattan, there's a lot of stuff that I don't quite see, and so, for example, everyone on the Hound and off the Hound was telling me that Hillary was going to lose. So I got on the bus in June thinking, well, of course she's going to win. I got off in September thinking, wow, Montreal real estate is pretty cheap, and the difference, and so they knew in the chapter I read, the one in Atlanta, I went to a bar just like Barry does, this very racist bar in Buckhead, this horrifying suburb, and the people there told me, they said, she's going to lose Pennsylvania. And I was like, come on, you idiots. Look, 538 on my phone says she's going to win by 9. Nate Silver says 19 points.
Yeah.
And they said, no, you don't know anything. She's going to lose. And I just laughed it off. But as the journey continued, I began to see a very different country. There were exciting things, too. There were people, so many of the people you meet on the bus are first-generation college students who are traveling vast amounts of time to go to some inexpensive college that they got into that's 3 states away from their parents, and they were full of hope, but it was also the time when I met my first white supremacists, or first acknowledged white supremacists in a state we'll call Louisiana.
Code name.
And in the book, the same thing happens to Barry, and Barry and myself both get off at Shreveport and buy New Testament coloring books because the gentlemen on the bus were talking about crucifying Muslims and Jews, of which I think we form a great fraternity. And so Barry brings it on and says, hey, don't crucify me. Romans 2, as Trump said. Romans 2. And I remember we were passing Grambling State University, which is a traditionally African-American college. And it was summer, but there were still some summertime students walking around. And one of the white supremacists got up and said, well, they got their colleges, and one day we'll have ours. And I thought, what part of Dartmouth don't you understand? But here's the thing, right? And they were quoting Breitbart, which was still kind of a new thing at that point, talking about their love of Mike Pence and all this stuff. But what was interesting to me was this. We, the non-white Christian, people of color, the one Jew, we were the majority on that bus by far. We did not challenge these 3 or 4 people. They stood there, we pretended we were asleep, looking out the window, looking at our shoes, looking at our phones. We sat there. We let it happen, even though theoretically somebody could have, done something. And that to me became a kind of metaphor for America in 2016.
Right.
A couple of noisy people take over the bus. And what happens when the people on the bus become the people in the government, right?
I heard all of you go, ooh. Yeah, I feel that. I feel that too.
Yeah.
The biggest change in America, if I may say so, from Canada, seems to have been the change in what's sayable in public now, right? Everything that is sayable in public now was never sayable, 5 years ago.
Absolutely. It's not like this is new ideas. I think these people thought the same way back when. It's the ability to get up. This was the first summer of Trump.
Right.
This is, Trump had come down the escalator, said Mexicans are rapists,
Right.
And once he says that.
First thing he said.
Yeah. So I realized, the journey was one intermingled with a kind of fear as well, because I was seeing things happen, change in real time. Meanwhile, I'm on Twitter a lot, and I was speaking out against Trump, and all the Holocaust imagery started appearing from my hometown of St. Petersburg, Russia, is where a lot of it.
Right.
I have 600,000 followers, and 300,000 of them are Kremlin bots. So, but they're such good bots.
Good.
I mean, you could not ask for better bots. Polite.
That's what you want out of a bot.
Yeah, good bot.
This is going to be my last question before we open up to the audience. You yourself are an immigrant. Immigrants in this book, so Jeff Park, Seema, the doctor, and her writer husband, they seem to be a little bit better adjusted. They seem to be a little bit better at leaving. I just being like, this is now enough.
Yeah.
Barry doesn't seem to be very good at that. Why do you think immigrants are inherently better at leaving?
Well, there's a in that very scene that I read, Barry and Jeff get into a kind of discussion, and Jeff said, Barry says, "Oh, I did everything on my own. I worked so hard. That's why that's why I'm so successful." And Jeff said, "You don't think you were lucky in any way?" And he says, "I had no luck in my life. I wasn't even lucky enough to be born an immigrant." And he very much believes that. But there is something really strange. I do feel it a little bit, that when I came, being an immigrant was the worst thing you could be. I worked so hard to get rid of my accent, to get rid of any traces of being Russian, until I got to Oberlin, where having any kind of ethnicity was super cool. Then I dressed in the whole Cossack thing with the bullets and pierogies, anyone? Yeah. But something weird has happened. And maybe this is part of the Trump phenomenon, is that people, I think it's the people who were accustomed to being on top solely by the dint of their whiteness and maleness now feel, well, I don't know, there's these goddamn immigrants, and
Right.
they're more successful.
Right.
I spent a lot of time, and a lot of this book takes place, 70 pages of the book takes place in the borderlands between El Paso, Texas, and Ciudad Juarez in Mexico. Beautiful places. And there, so I spent a lot of time with profs at the University of Texas at El Paso. And El Paso is 87% Latino, and most of the students were Latino and first generation to go to school. And a lot were commuting 4 hours through the immigration lines to get an education from Juarez and then commuting back. So, yeah, the
Right.
rapists that Donald
Right.
Trump was talking about. So these are the people that are really on the way up. They're changing their lives. The people on the supremacists on the bus, they'd seen the heights of where their whiteness would take them.
Right.
There's and Obama, of course, the fact that Obama was president for two terms probably contributed to this as well. There's a kind of dignity tax that some of these people are willing to pay, where they will be penalized financially themselves, because the whole idea of the Trump administration is just basically taking money from them and giving it to the 0.01%. Where I live, upstate New York, I live half the year in upstate. There's a truck that's on cinder blocks. The guy can't afford tires anymore, right? And clearly he's on many forms of assistance. But the license plate says taxes too high. And that kind of summarizes it
Yeah.
for me,
Yeah.
It's such a mess. It's such a mess.
It's a pleasure watching it from up here, let me tell you.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
when we go to Montreal quite a bit because it's 4 hours away from us, and we're always looking at the real estate ads. Boy, it's good.
I often wonder how much Americans think about Canada, because we're so exposed. Like, the border is so porous in one direction.
Yeah.
But then the other direction, I think there's not a chance that you guys are, fully aware of all of our political debates, the way that so many people in this room watch the Kavanaugh hearings, for example.
Yeah.
So I always
Well,
found that interesting.
we kind of peaked with Rob Ford. He made us feel good for a little bit.
Yeah.
And now Dougie Ford gives us a bit of solace, not as much, but, No, and look, and I've always been fascinated with Canada. I've always loved it, and I've always followed the politics pretty closely. And I'm a big fan of Mordecai Richler, so I read a lot of, I do know Montreal quite well. And I understand there are many, many issues up here. This is far from a perfect society. But given our slide into not just imperfection, but very dangerous kind of stuff. And My parents and I had a lot of static, as psychiatrists say. But one thing they did really brilliantly was they knew when to leave, and that's something to consider.